In the movie Psycho, there's a swamp behind the Bates Motel. I'm going to show you how I made the swamp to fit into my Psycho Halloween display. And you can totally use my technique and improvise to create your very own bog, bayou, or marsh. And if you haven't seen Psycho already, go ahead and stop the video. I don't want to spoil it for you. To begin, you'll want to grab a piece of watercolor paper or chipboard, cardboard, something that isn't going to become wavy when it's wet with paint. You'll also need a writing utensil, some swampy paint colors, a paintbrush with a little dish of water to thin down the paint if needed, and clear glue. For this project, I use Aleene's Clear Gel Tacky Glue. Alright, so you'll begin with sketching out a basic shape for your swamp. Once you have your basic shape, you'll apply the main color of paint, the darker color, in the middle and work your way out. Unfortunately, my camera wasn't on at the time, so I missed that part. But here I've painted the base the brown color, and I'm filling in to the outer edge of my design. And there's Ash, just checking out the swamp. Thankfully, he didn't offer to help. It was getting a little too streaky with the brush strokes, so I went ahead and got a paper towel and just smeared it up a little bit. I'm still just playing around with the colors. In the movie, the swamp water is incredibly dark. It's almost like maple syrup or oil. Very, very black. I'm lightening up here a bit. You could totally deviate from this coloring as well. And if you want a refresher, in the comments I posted a link to view the swamp scene from the movie, as well as a pretty concise description if you want to read about it. And again, you can stray outside your drawing. It's just a suggestion. And keep in mind that the paint will darken up and lose that shine when dry. Once I've got my coloring where I want it, I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to pour on the clear glue. And I'm going to brush it on pretty messy, just for texture purposes. And here's where I definitely put a psycho spin on the swamp. I had a major issue finding a miniature of Marion Crane's 1956 Ford 300. I really wanted her car to be in front of the Bates Motel in the display, but to no avail. I just couldn't find it. So I kept thinking, well, can I make it out of paper? Nope, that'll look too pathetic. And then I thought, well, actually, I could make it out of paper. I'm just going to put it in the swamp. So we're just going to see what happens here. So I found a picture of Marion's car going into the swamp from the movie. I resized it, printed it out, and cut it out. So it's going in the swamp. I'm brushing it lightly with the brown so that it's not as completely obvious. While the glue is still slightly tacky, I'm going to push it down with the other end of the brush, just to kind of tack it on there. It's still a little too bright for me, so I'm going to shade it down a little bit more. Since the swamp is in Southern California, I didn't add the typical swamp critters you might expect. If you were going to use this technique for a more authentic swamp, you could add a gator, turtle, gar, frog, moccasins, big muddy monster, anything really. I thought it might be fun to highlight it a little bit further, so I had a bottle of neon yellow, and I'm going to put a little dab of this on the taillights. I didn't wait long enough for the brown to dry, so the yellow did turn a slightly greenish brown color, but I actually like the effect, so I left it as is. Now onto another coat of clear glue. In the movie, there are some eerie, gurgling sounds coming from the car when it's sinking down, down, down. So I thought that some bubbles might be kind of cool. I'm poking around on the glue, trying to get some air in the glue to create some of the bubbles. It's still a little bit too smooth, so I'm going to rough it up a little bit. I'm going to let this dry and then cut it out. Now, Truth be told, my paper waved pretty bad, but if I put something on top of it to flatten it, it would totally crush the really cool bubbles that I created. So what I'm gonna do is glue it down onto my landform, and I'm gonna also weigh down the edges so they don't curl up. And I'm gonna do this with actual rocks. And since I'm going for this murky, dead, rot feel for the psycho scene, I'm going to add some moss, some dead grass and leaves, trimmed up pine needle clusters, and also just a couple of broken off tree branches. Living things won't work here in this scene, but if I were creating one outside of the psycho scene, I'd totally add some knobby cypress tree knees, tupelos, lily pads, cattails. I'd even dot the display with this neon yellow for fireflies. Sounds like a future video to me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this psycho swamp.